Founding Myths and the Birth of Rome. The story of Rome begins not in reality, but in legend. According to ancient myth, the city was born from the blood of betrayal and raised by wild instinct. Romulus and Remus, twin brothers, were sons of a mortal woman and the god Mars. Abandoned as infants, they were saved by a she-wolf who nursed them beneath a fig tree on the Palatine Hill. As they grew older, the brothers sought to found a city together, but ambition divided them. Romulus wanted the city on one hill, Remus on another. When Remus mocked Romulus by leaping over his walls, Romulus killed him in a fit of rage. Thus, the city of Rome was born, founded on fratricide, ambition, and divine destiny. From this moment forward, Rome would always be a city of contradictions, noble ideals built on brutal foundations. Early Rome was a kingdom ruled by 7 kings. These kings brought architecture, religion, and the first walls. The last of them, Tarquin the Proud, ruled with cruelty. When his son violated a noblewoman, the people rose up. Rome expelled its last king in 509 BC. The age of monarchy ended. The Republic had begun. A new system emerged, elected magistrates, 2 consuls, a senate. The goal was balance. No more kings. Power must be shared. Liberty became a Roman obsession, at least for the elite. But this young republic was not safe. It was surrounded by enemies, Etruscans to the north, Latin tribes to the south, and Sabines nearby. Rome fought battle after battle, defending and expanding. The Romans were tenacious. They believed in virtus, strength, honor, courage in battle. Even when they lost, they rebuilt, rearmed, and returned to the fight. These early centuries forged the Roman identity, a people who would never quit, never compromise, and never forgive betrayal.
The Republic rises, law, war, and the Roman spirit. With the kings gone, the Roman Republic took shape. The Senate, made up of aristocrats called patricians, became the heart of Roman politics. But Rome was not a democracy as we know it. Power belonged to a few, and the many had to fight for a voice. The lower class, or plebeians, demanded rights. They walked out of the city in protest, refusing to fight in Rome's armies unless given more representation. Over time, this led to reform. Tribunes were created to protect the people. Laws were written down on the 12 tables and posted in the Forum. Rome was becoming a society of law. Harsh law, but law nonetheless. Even in its youth, Rome was obsessed with structure and order. The Republic wasn't just a government, it was an ideal, a balance between power and restraint, ambition and duty. But it also thrived on expansion. Rome did not simply defend itself, it grew by conquest. From the Latin League to the Etruscans, Rome began absorbing its neighbors. Its legions, citizen soldiers fighting for glory and land, became the sharpest sword in Italy. Then came a new enemy from the south, the Samnites. The Samnite wars were long, bloody, and brutal. Fought in the rugged mountains of central Italy, they tested Rome's will to the limit. At one point, a Roman army was trapped in a narrow valley and forced to surrender. It was a national humiliation. But the Romans did not break. They reformed, trained harder, and returned stronger. Eventually, they defeated the Samnites, proving to the world and to themselves that Rome would rise from any setback. By the late 3rd century BC, Rome controlled most of Italy. Its power had grown, but so had its ambitions. And across the sea, in North Africa, another power was rising, Carthage.
The Punic Wars. Hannibal and the Road to Supremacy. The greatest challenge Rome ever faced did not come from within Italy. It came from across the sea, from the powerful city of Carthage. Carthage was a maritime empire. Founded by Phoenician traders, it controlled trade across the western Mediterranean. Its wealth came from silver, ships, and commerce. Rome and Carthage first clashed in 264 BC. The First Punic War was fought over Sicily. It was a long, grinding naval conflict. Rome had no navy at first, but learned quickly. By building ships and training rowers in mock sea battles on land, Rome adapted. Eventually, it won, claiming Sicily as its first overseas province. But Carthage was far from finished. In 218 BC, the Second Punic War began, and it would shake Rome to its core. At its center was one man, Hannibal Barca. A military genius, Hannibal did the unthinkable. He led an army, complete with war elephants, across the Alps, through snow, storms, and death, to strike at the heart of Italy. Rome was stunned. Hannibal crushed them at the Battle of Trebia, then Lake Trasimene, but nothing compared to Cannae. At Cannae, Hannibal encircled and annihilated a Roman army twice the size of his own. It was a slaughter. Tens of thousands died in a single day. Rome seemed broken, but it refused to surrender. The Senate vowed never to negotiate with Hannibal. Instead, Rome raised more armies. It delayed, resisted, and wore him down. Then, a new general emerged, Scipio Africanus. Scipio studied Hannibal's tactics. He took the war to Carthage itself, forcing Hannibal to return home. At the Battle of Zama in 202 BC, Scipio defeated Hannibal, ending the war. Rome had survived the greatest threat in its history. It had become not just a power in Italy, but a master of the Mediterranean. But every victory came with a cost, and every enemy defeated left new enemies within.
Rome's new empire and the seeds of corruption. Rome had won. Carthage was destroyed. Now the Republic stood unchallenged across the Mediterranean. Spain, North Africa, Greece, and parts of Asia Minor became Roman provinces. Rome had become an empire in all but name. Trade flowed. Slaves flooded in from conquered lands. Gold and silver poured into Roman coffers. But the very success of Rome began to poison its soul. The old virtues, discipline, simplicity, duty, gave way to greed and decadence. Senators grew rich from tax farming and land seizures. The gap between the rich and poor widened. The small farmers, once the backbone of Rome, returned from war to find their lands taken. Unable to compete, many moved into the cities, especially Rome itself, seeking work, but finding only hunger. To buy their silence, politicians offered bread and circuses, free food and massive games in the Colosseum. The people cheered, but the Republic was cracking. Some tried to fix it. The Gracchus brothers, Tiberius and Gaius, fought for land reform and justice. They wanted to give land back to the poor and limit the power of the wealthy. But the Senate resisted. First Tiberius was killed, then Gaius. Both died not in battle, but on the streets of Rome, murdered by mobs loyal to the elite. This was a turning point. Political violence had entered Roman life, and it would only grow worse. Rome had conquered the world, but could not govern itself. The rise of Marius and the army's loyalty shift. As the Republic cracked, war broke out across its frontiers. Rome fought enemies in North Africa, Gaul, and against Germanic tribes. But internal chaos made these wars harder to win. Enter Gaius Marius, brilliant, ruthless, and ambitious. Marius reformed the Roman army. Before him, soldiers had to be landowners. But Marius opened the legions to the poor, men with no wealth, no prospects, nothing but loyalty to their general. He promised them land, loot, and glory. The result? A professional army, loyal not to the Senate, but to Marius. He became a hero. He defeated invading tribes and was elected consul, an unprecedented 7 times. But his rise set a dangerous precedent. Generals now held real power. Politics was no longer about ideas. It was about who controlled the legions. The Republic would never be the same.
Sulla marches on Rome, and civil war begins. After Marius came Lucius Cornelius Sulla, an aristocrat and brilliant general. Sulla and Marius were once allies, but soon they became deadly enemies. When Sulla was given command of a war in the east, Marius used political tricks to steal it from him. Sulla responded with something no Roman had ever done. He marched his army into Rome itself. It was unthinkable. Rome had always been protected from its own soldiers, but now, for the first time, a Roman army conquered Rome. Sulla crushed his enemies and declared himself dictator with no time limit. He executed hundreds through proscriptions, lists of enemies to be hunted and killed. Their property was confiscated. Fear ruled the streets. After reshaping the Republic to favor the Senate, Sulla did the unexpected. He stepped down. But the damage was done. Sulla showed Rome that power came from the sword, and once that line had been crossed, others would follow it. The rise of Julius Caesar. In the aftermath of Sulla's dictatorship, new figures emerged. Among them, Julius Caesar. He was young, charming, ambitious, and from a noble family fallen on hard times. Caesar knew how to win the people's hearts. He gave speeches, threw games, and formed alliances. With Crassus, the richest man in Rome, and Pompey, the greatest general, he formed the first triumvirate, a secret deal to control Rome. When he became consul, Caesar secured a military command in Gaul. There he built a legend. Over nearly a decade, Caesar conquered the Gauls, crossed rivers under fire, and even reached Britain. He wrote reports of his victories, dispatches that thrilled the Roman public. While the Senate feared him, the people adored him. Caesar had become a hero and a threat. But Rome could not hold two masters. The Senate ordered him to disband his army and return. Instead, in 49 BC, Caesar crossed the Rubicon River with his legions, an act of war. He uttered the fateful words, "Alea acta est," or "the die is cast." Civil war had begun. Civil War and the Fall of the Republic. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon, there was no turning back. Rome was plunged into civil war. On one side, Caesar and his loyal legions. On the other, Pompey and the Senate. Cities took sides. Friends became enemies. Rome, once proud of its law and order, became a battlefield. Pompey fled to Greece. Caesar followed, defeating him at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC. Pompey escaped to Egypt, But there he was assassinated by a pharaoh hoping to please Caesar. Instead, Caesar wept at the sight of Pompey's severed head. Even among enemies, Romans had honor. In Egypt, Caesar became entangled with Cleopatra. He helped her win the throne, and their affair produced a son. When he returned to Rome, Caesar was a god in all but name. He was named dictator for life. He reformed laws, canceled debts, and expanded the Senate. But many feared he would crown himself king. The Republic, already dying, now gasped for breath.
The Ides of March. Rome had once killed its kings. Now, some believed it must kill Caesar. On the Ides of March, March 15, 44 BC, senators gathered in the theater of Pompeii. Caesar arrived unarmed. As he took his seat, the conspirators struck. They stabbed him, one after another, until he fell. According to legend, his last words were, "Et tu, Brutus," or "You too, Brutus." The man who had conquered Gaul, crossed the Rubicon, and ruled Rome, now lay dead at the feet of a statue, ironically, the statue of Pompey. But Caesar's death did not save the Republic. Instead, it unleashed chaos. Riots broke out. His allies seized power, and the conspirators, far from heroes, became fugitives. Caesar's ghost would haunt Rome and shape its future.
The rise of Augustus. After Caesar's assassination, a new power struggle began. Mark Antony, Caesar's top general, took control of his armies. But Caesar had left something more dangerous than soldiers: a will. In it, he named his grandnephew Octavian as his adopted son and heir. Octavian was only 18, but shrewd beyond his years. He allied with Antony and another general, Lepidus, forming the Second Triumvirate. Together, they hunted down Caesar's killers, Brutus and Cassius, defeating them at the Battle of Philippi. Then the triumvirs turned on each other. Lepidus was pushed aside. Antony, now with Cleopatra, grew distant from Rome. His enemies claimed he had become more Egyptian than Roman. In 31 BC, Octavian and Antony faced off at the Battle of Actium. Octavian's fleet won. Antony and Cleopatra fled and later took their own lives. Octavian returned to Rome, undisputed master of the world. In 27 BC, the Senate gave him a new name, Augustus. The Republic was dead. The Empire had begun.
Augustus and the birth of Pax Romana. Augustus was not the first Roman emperor in name, but he was the first in truth. He knew Rome's soul still clung to the idea of the Republic, so he played the part of a humble servant. He called himself Princeps, the first citizen, not a king. He let the Senate meet. He respected old traditions. But in silence, in structure, in sheer influence, he held all the real power. He controlled the legions. He controlled the provinces. He controlled Rome. And for the first time in centuries, Rome had peace. Pax Romana, the Roman peace, had begun. For over 40 years, Augustus ruled wisely. He reformed taxes, created police and fire services, built roads stretching across Europe, and ushered in a golden age of art, literature, and architecture. Poets like Virgil wrote epics. Temples rose. Aqueducts brought water to the masses. Rome became not just a city, but the city,
the heart of civilization. But Augustus knew peace came not from words alone. He kept the legions loyal. He posted soldiers at the edges of the empire. He made examples of rebellion. In the east, he humbled Egypt. In the west, he pushed Rome's frontier to the Atlantic. But in the north, beyond the Rhine, lay the Germanic tribes, wild, independent, and fiercely resistant. In 9 AD, 3 Roman legions marched into the forests of Teutoburg, led by a Roman-trained local named Arminius. They were ambushed. Trapped between trees, bogs, and brutal discipline, the legions were slaughtered. Rome lost 20,000 men. It was a catastrophe. Augustus never forgot. He reportedly walked the palace halls crying, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions." From that day on, Rome would respect the wild north, but the borders held. When Augustus died in 14 AD, Rome wept, not just for a man, but for an age of stability, clarity, and vision. He left behind an empire strong, organized, and ready for greatness. Yet behind that greatness, cracks were already forming.
Tiberius, Caligula, and the shadows of empire. Augustus left behind a powerful, unified empire, but not a clear path for succession. He had no son, only his stepson, Tiberius, a capable general, but cold, distant, and deeply mistrustful. When Tiberius became emperor, he continued Augustus's system, but without the warmth, charisma, or popular touch. He left Rome for Capri, ruling from afar, surrounded by whispers, spies, and secret executions. Senators lived in fear. Accusations of treason, real or imagined, led to exile or death. Rome became a city of silence. Then came his successor, Caligula. At first, Rome rejoiced. Caligula was young, charming, the great-grandson of Augustus. He gave bonuses to soldiers, hosted games, and freed prisoners. But within months, everything changed. He fell seriously ill, and when he recovered, something was different. Some say madness, others say cruelty revealed. Caligula began to act like a god. He ordered temples to be built in his image. He demanded worship, not loyalty. He mocked the Senate, made his horse a priest, and laughed as nobles groveled at his feet. He drained the treasury on lavish games and golden palaces. He executed without cause. He spoke of war on the sea itself, marching his legions to collect seashells as spoils. The people began to fear him. Even his own guards grew uneasy. In 41 AD, they struck. Caligula was stabbed to death in a hallway of the imperial palace. Rome had tasted the poison of absolute power, and now it could never spit it out.
Claudius, Nero, and the fire within. After Caligula's assassination, Rome was in chaos. The Senate hesitated. Perhaps now the Republic could be restored. But the Praetorian Guard had other plans. They found Claudius, Caligula's uncle, hiding behind a curtain. He was limping, stuttering, and considered a fool. But the Guard proclaimed him emperor. The Senate, powerless, obeyed. And to everyone's surprise, Claudius ruled well. Behind the awkward manner was a sharp mind. He reformed the courts, improved the civil service, and built Rome's greatest aqueducts. He also led Rome's conquest of Britain. For the first time, the Eagle standards crossed the sea to the misty island that had resisted for centuries. Claudius was no fool, but he was surrounded by ambition. His wives and freedmen schemed behind his back. He was likely poisoned by his fourth wife, Agrippina, who wanted her own son Nero to rule. And so, Nero became emperor at 17. At first, things went well. Nero was artistic, generous, and surrounded by good advisors. But as he grew older, he turned darker. He murdered his stepbrother, then his mother, then his wife. He fancied himself a poet, an actor, a musician, and forced senators to sit through hours of his performances. But Nero's name would be forever tied to one event: the Great Fire of Rome. In 64 AD, flames consumed the city. Neighborhoods burned for days. Thousands were left homeless. Rumors spread that Nero had started the fire to make room for a golden palace. To deflect blame, Nero accused the Christians, a small, strange sect growing in Rome. They were arrested, tortured, and killed in horrifying ways, burned as human torches, fed to lions in the arena. Nero's popularity collapsed. Rebellions erupted across the empire. Governors refused to obey him. The Senate declared him an enemy of Rome. Cornered and abandoned, Nero took his own life in 68 AD. His final words: "What an artist dies in me." With Nero's death, the Julio-Claudian line ended, and Rome stood at the edge of civil war once again.
The Year of the Four Emperors. When Nero died in 68 AD, there was no clear heir. The imperial line that began with Augustus had ended, and into that void rushed ambition, blood, and civil war. In just 1 year, 4 different men would claim the throne, each backed by legions, each crowned by blood. The first was Galba, a stern old senator proclaimed emperor by the Senate, but he quickly made enemies. He refused to pay promised bonuses to soldiers. He executed rivals. He acted like an emperor from another age, rigid, cold, and blind to danger. Within months, the Praetorian Guard killed him in the Forum. His head was paraded on a pike. Next came Otho, once Galba's ally, now his usurper. But Otho's reign was cut short. Far to the north, another general, Vitellius, was marching on Rome with the Rhine legions. He met him in battle. He lost. Rather than plunge the empire deeper into war, Otho committed suicide, honorably, quietly, a rare act of dignity. Vitellius entered Rome in triumph, but his excesses were legendary. He held endless banquets. He executed rivals with glee. He turned the palace into a playground. And far away in the east, another general rose, Vespasian. While Rome burned and bled, Vespasian had been fighting the Jewish revolt in Judea. Now his legions declared him emperor. He marched west. His forces clashed with Vitellius's loyalists near Cremona. A brutal, bloody battle followed, thousands dead, cities destroyed. Vespasian's men marched into Rome. Vitellius was dragged through the streets and killed in public. At last, in December 69 AD, Vespasian became emperor. The chaos had ended. Rome had a new ruler, tough, practical, no nonsense. A man of humble birth, raised through merit, not blood. Under Vespasian, Rome would rebuild, and a symbol of its resilience would rise from the ashes.
Vespasian, Titus, and the Colosseum of Blood and Glory. When Vespasian took power in 69 AD, Rome was exhausted. Civil war had left its mark. Cities burned, legions divided, trust shattered. But Vespasian was no stranger to hardship. He was a career soldier, a builder, a survivor. He focused not on glory, but on rebuilding. He stabilized the economy, reformed the army, and restored order. He taxed luxuries, even toilets, to refill the imperial treasury. But more than anything, he sought to give Rome something symbolic, a monument not to a man, but to the people. In the center of the city, where Nero's golden palace once stood, Vespasian began building a vast amphitheater, the Flavian Amphitheater, what we call today the Colosseum. It was built by slaves, funded by the spoils of war, and designed to unite a fractured Rome through spectacle. While construction began, his son Titus completed the brutal conquest of Judea. In 70 AD, after a long siege, Roman legions stormed Jerusalem. The city was destroyed. The temple, sacred to Jews, was burned to the ground. Titus returned to Rome triumphant, parading captives and treasures. The Arch of Titus still shows that march of victory. When Vespasian died in 79 AD, Titus became emperor, and months later he completed the Colosseum and opened it to the public. The inaugural games lasted 100 days. There were gladiators, wild beasts, mock naval battles. Thousands died, while tens of thousands cheered. This was Rome's gift to itself, an empire built on blood, now entertained by blood. Yet even in triumph, fate whispered again. In 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius erupted, without warning. The cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum were buried in ash. Tens of thousands perished in a single day. Titus responded with compassion, sending aid and support, a rare moment of imperial humanity. But just 2 years into his reign, he died suddenly. Some whispered poison, others believed divine fate. His brother, Domitian, now took the throne, and once again, the shadows returned.
Domitian and the tyranny of silence. When Domitian became emperor in 81 AD, Rome held its breath. He was the younger brother of Titus and had long lived in the shadow of greater men. Now, with the purple cloak on his shoulders, Domitian ruled not as a servant of the Republic, but as a god-king. He insisted on being addressed as Dominus et Deus, Lord and God. Statues of him rose across the empire. His image was stamped into every coin. Domitian brought order, yes. He strengthened the borders, raised discipline in the legions, and built impressive structures. But his reign was ruled by fear. He spied on senators. He punished whispers. A glance, a joke, a poem, anything could be treason. Writers were exiled or executed. Philosophers like Epictetus were silenced. The Senate became a puppet, bowing and scraping under the weight of paranoia. Domitian controlled not only Rome's body, but tried to choke its soul. And yet, quietly, resistance grew, not with swords, but with words, silence, and memory. Writers like Tacitus, Juvenal, and Suetonius would later recall this time with bitterness, not just for its cruelty, but for the cowardice it revealed. For many in Rome, it wasn't just Domitian's power that was terrifying. It was how easily people surrendered to it. In 96 AD, even the palace turned against him. He was stabbed to death by court officials. His name was Damnatio Memoriae, erased from inscriptions, defaced on monuments, cut from history. But Rome remembered. The empire had survived another tyrant, but each time it came at a cost. Liberty was now a memory, the Republic a ghost. The question now was not if Rome would fall, but when.
Nerva, Trajan, and the Last Golden Dawn. After Domitian's death, the Senate chose an unlikely savior, Nerva. He was old, wise, and, most importantly, not a tyrant. He ruled gently, briefly, and with one brilliant decision. He adopted Trajan. Trajan was everything a Roman could admire: a soldier, a builder, a statesman. Under his rule, Rome would reach its greatest territorial extent. He led campaigns into Dacia, modern-day Romania, defeating the fierce King Decebalus and bringing home unimaginable wealth. With that gold, Trajan built public works, expanded welfare, and gave the people bread and pride. His most famous monument still stands, Trajan's Column, spiraling with carved scenes of conquest, glory, and order. But Trajan did not stop there. He marched east into Parthia, sacking cities, reaching as far as the Persian Gulf. Rome, for the first and only time, stretched from Britain to Babylon. But even Trajan knew limits. As he lay dying in 117 AD, he whispered one final gift to Rome. He named Hadrian his successor.
Hadrian, the Wall, and Rome's retreat. Hadrian did not seek more land. He sought to protect what Rome already had. He withdrew from Parthia, strengthened borders, and built one of Rome's most iconic monuments, Hadrian's Wall, in the wild north of Britannia. It stretched across the island. Stone, turf, towers, a line between Roman civilization and barbarian chaos. Hadrian was a philosopher-emperor. He admired Greek culture, wrote poetry, and traveled endlessly. He walked the streets of Alexandria. He dined with governors in Gaul. He saw the empire not from maps, but with his own eyes. He reformed the law, the army, and the economy. Under Hadrian, Rome enjoyed rare balance. But even he could not stop time. The Pax Romana, the Roman peace, was fading. Tensions stirred at the edges. Emperors to come would inherit glory and inevitable decline.
Marcus Aurelius and the Philosopher's Burden. In 161 AD, Rome found a rare treasure, a philosopher on the throne. Marcus Aurelius ruled not for glory, but from a deep sense of duty. While others wrote laws, he wrote thoughts. His Meditations remain one of history's greatest works of wisdom. But even wisdom cannot hold back war. Germanic tribes pressed the northern borders. Plagues swept across the empire, killing millions. Marcus led campaigns from frozen rivers, writing by lamplight between battles. He ruled with compassion, yet unflinching resolve. And when he died in 180 AD, his final mistake was clear. He passed the empire to his son, Commodus. Commodus saw himself not as a servant of Rome, but as a god, a gladiator, a showman. He fought in the arena. He renamed months after himself. He ruled like Nero reborn. He was assassinated in his bath. And with his death, the golden line of emperors ended. The age of philosopher kings was over.
The fall of the West. The 3rd and 4th centuries brought chaos. Plagues, inflation, and invasions shattered Rome's stability. Emperors rose and fell, some reigning for weeks, others for hours. Germanic tribes poured over weakened borders. The Huns surged west, driving fear like wildfire. In desperation, Rome split into East and West. The East, Byzantium, would endure, but the West was crumbling. Rome itself was sacked in 410 AD by the Visigoths. Once unthinkable, the eternal city now lay burning. Efforts to restore glory failed. Armies were foreign. Loyalty faded. Even the title of emperor became a shadow. Finally, in 476 AD, a barbarian named Odoacer deposed the last Western Roman emperor, a boy named Romulus Augustulus, a tragic echo of Rome's first king, Romulus. The Roman Empire, as the West knew it, was gone, but not forgotten. Its roads still lie beneath modern highways. Its laws shape our governments. Its language echoes in our speech. And its ruins whisper, still, of ambition, glory, and the price of power. Rome fell, but Rome never truly died.